Hey, welcome back. So again, we're in this video, what we're going to look at is moving so that you can move the camera around or the camera will follow you. So again, currently when you push play, and in the last video I asked you to play with your settings, if you play with the settings while you are playing the game. So for example, if I'm over here and I change these settings and then you click stop or you stop playing it, your settings will go back to what they were. So what you need to do is change them at this point here. So right here, if we change them when we're stopped, it will keep those changes in. So for example, if I wanted to keep my mass at 4, to change the linear drag to 1, change the gravity to 2, speed to 10, and the jump force to 15. Let's just say, so let's say those are the values I want to use. So what's going to happen is these will be maintained now within the game itself. So what we're going to do is look at, and again, so if we play, your character goes off the screen and you can't see it anymore. So what we want to do is fix that so that you can find your character. And so he's gone off the screen, hasn't disappeared. Similarly, the jump, you can constantly jump. We're going to fix that as well so that you can only jump when you are grounded. So currently, what we're going to do to fix the camera, so in the main camera, we want to add a script to it. So in the main camera, you are going to add a component and we are going to add a script, so new script, and we're going to call this camera controller. So create and add it. And similar to what we did before, we are going to edit the script. So you want to click over here and edit the camera controller script. And for this one, so the variable, this is a fairly short and easy script to set up. So what we want to do is create a public transform. So we want to find a specific location, right? So we're trying to find a position for the camera to follow. So the public transform, and we'll just call this player. And then for the void update, so we don't need to put anything in the void start. For the void update, what we're going to do is transform dot position equals new vector 2, or sorry, vector 3 rather. And the reason that is, I'll kind of come back to in a second. So new vector 3 player dot position dot x player dot position dot y, and then -10, and then again make sure your semicolon ends up. So what this is doing then, so the public transform is our player. So right now it's going to find an object. So currently we are going to find our player. So what it's going to do then is the transform dot position. So it's moving to, so wherever our player position is, right? So it's finding that player dot position on the X, on the Y, and then for the Z axis, if you don't change it, sometimes the camera will get lost or it'll get stuck on the same layer as your object, so you won't be able to see anything. So this essentially moves the camera away from the screen, so you're always kind of looking back at the player. So we'll save the script. So save the camera controller. And we'll close out of that. And under your camera controller over here, you will have this player transform now. So right now it doesn't have one, so we need to take our player. So left click on it and just drag your player down into that spot. So now it's finding your player as a transform. So now if we push play, the camera will follow your player around, right? So we can push play and jump and so on. So the camera follows the player around the game. So that's how we set up the camera. So for now, we'll leave the camera like that. Now the other thing we wanted to fix is the jumping. So we want to do it so that you can only jump when you are grounded. So before we do that, I'm going to add, so a few things. I want you to sort of just work through, quickly just add some objects. So either you can add the platforms here, or you can just add grass layers as little platforms to jump on. So I'm going to pause out and do that quickly. Okay, so now that we're back, so again, make sure that you are, when you're doing this, hopefully you remember to change your grid to the foreground. And then I've just added some platforms and some grass layers and so on to be able to jump on and move around. So what we're going to be doing is jumping and moving onto these platforms. So a few things, your game can be, it's your choice, right? This is where your imagination comes in. So you can make your game so that it's a level going upwards, or you can make it so that it's a platform going left and right. You can do a combination where you have more depth, where you have a kind of a higher and a lower area as well as left and right. It's up to you in terms of which direction you want to go for your game design. So what we're going to do now is we want to be able to jump onto these platforms. So if we play, and so we can move around, we can jump onto the platforms. However, what we want to be able to do is so that you can't just sort of cheat and kind of constantly jump up, right? So that you're only jumping and you're using that. So to do that, what we need to do is we're going to go back to the player. We're going to change the script. So player, go to the player controller script. We're going to edit the script. And in the script, we want to add a few things. So some of the variables we need to add is so it's a Boolean. So we're going to add a public bool and call it grounded. So this is a, is the character grounded or not? So it's looking at finding, is the character grounded, i.e. is it on the ground or not touching the ground? So public bool grounded. We are also going to create a public layer mask and call it what is ground. So the layer mask itself is, so up here we have different layers. So for this public layer mask, we're going to essentially drag or tell the script that where is the ground. So what is the ground itself? And the layer mask is a Unity specific function. So public layer mask, and then we are also going to create a public transform. And what this is it's going to find so where is your character? So it's finding the position of your character, and we're going to call this public transform ground checker. And then we are also going to create a public float. So wherever that ground checker is, so the game object, so your player, we want to create a radius around it to see if it's overlapping with the ground itself. So we're going to create a public float, and this is going to be the ground check radius. And we're not going to identify specific values for those. So if we were to save this, so if we save this out and go back down, so minimize that. So we'll see those variables created down in the player controller script now. So now those variables are here. So is the character grounded? What is ground? The ground checker and the ground check radius. So this won't, because these variables haven't been identified what they are yet, we need to create these. So the first things first is, so for your foreground, we want to, so where it's layers, so this is where the layer mask comes in, so it's finding these values. So we don't have a layer called ground. So we're going to edit layers. No, that's not where I want to be. Okay, sorry about that. So I found where I needed to be. So with the layers, so it's not up here with the layers, we want to change this layer here. So we want to add a layer. So currently there's only those 5 layers there. We want to add a layer, and we're going to call it ground. And that's it. So for the ground, we want to now change. So our foreground, we want to set it so that it is the ground layer. So now all of those tiles that we've painted into the foreground is identified, so that layer mask can find that, okay, that's the ground. The other thing we need to do, so right now if we go back to the player, we can now change that, right? So what is the ground? So that's the layer mask. We called it what is ground. So the layer mask is finding those layers that are identified as the ground. Now, for the ground check radius, we need to make a radius around our character, but we're not going to do it just around the entire character. What we're going to do is add a game object. So for the player, you're going to right click and create a 2D object. So right click and create game object. And then the game object, we will just give it a name. So we'll call it ground check. So for this game object, so we've created this game object that is situated on top of our player. We want to be able to see it, so we can click on that little box up there, and then you can give it a symbol. So I'm going to just give it a little circle. You could give it a diamond. You can change the color and so on. So we want to be able to move that. So we're going to go over, click the little move cursors, and then we can drag that. So you want this because we want to know when is the player touching the ground. So we want that position to be near the feet of your character. So we're going to move it to the bottom, and that should be fine. So this is an invisible object. You're not going to see this during the game. It's just, it allows you to see where that specific transform is. So if we go back to the player, we want to now take that ground checker, so that transform that we created, so that position, so it's finding now, so that transform we created called ground checker, it's using that game object. So it's using this position, and then it's going to, so we're going to create code that's going to say when this overlaps with the ground, then it is grounded. So if we go back to the script now, we need to finish the script. So in the script, we want to do this in the fixed update. So in the fixed update, we are going to just say grounded equals, so remember grounded was our Boolean. So the grounded equals, and it's a physics 2D, and then there's a function called overlap circle. So overlap is capitalized and then circle is capitalized. So physics 2D dot overlap circle. And then in the parentheses, we're going to put 3 values in. So we want to put the transform, so the ground checker. So we're putting the ground checker, so the ground checker dot position. So we're finding the position of where that ground checker is with the ground check radius. So the ground check radius. And then also with the what is ground layer mask. So what is the ground? So those are the 3 variables that are going to be used by this overlap circle. So it's basically finding, so where are the ground layers, and then where is that public transform, and then with the radius around your transform, does it overlap? So does this position overlap with the ground? So that gives you the is it grounded part, but now we need to add that to the jump. So you only jump when your character is grounded. So in the grounded, we're going to add, so if is grounded, no, is, so if is grounded equals true, and equals for Booleans needs to be equal equal. So if is grounded equals true, what happens? Right, so if is grounded is true, then what is going to happen in terms of the jumping? So for this, all we're going to do is take the code that we had already had for the jump. So we're going to cut this and move it into the if it is grounded. And we have an error. Oh, I know why, because I didn't call this is grounded. I just called it public bool grounded. So actually, I'm going to change this. So we're going to make it is grounded. So if is grounded, and I'm going to go back and change the name of this to is grounded. So if is grounded is true, So if you have the overlap there, then it's going to jump when it is on the ground. So we're going to save the player controller again. Close out, let it compile. So the name grounded doesn't exist. So let's go back to our script. And I'm sure it's something that I had because that's I need to now change this. So because I did change the name of it, I didn't change the name of that. So is grounded there. So file, save. Close out of that. So now that it's compiled, so if we hit play, and you can see this happening, so is grounded is false right now. And then when it lands on the ground, oh, I know sorry. One more thing, so we need to also give it a radius, right? So let's just make this radius 0.3. So you don't want it too big, you don't want it because then you'll be able to jump even when you're not on the ground. So 0.1 is probably fine. I'm gonna put it at 0.2. And then hit play. So now when your character hits the ground, this is grounded as false should become true because now your transform is overlapping. So your transform is overlapping with the ground. So when I jump, you can see it turns to false. And now you can't keep jumping, right? So you can only really move and jump when you are on the ground. So I can jump, but now I can't jump. So you can kind of move through the game. So this is where, right? So depending on your platforms, that's why hopefully you didn't create a full level. So I can't jump high enough. However, you can just play with your jump forces or change the locations of the platforms, add a platform in here so that you can jump through the scene. So that'll conclude this video. In the next video, we will look at creating the animations for your character to move around. So add a few more objects and create a scene that you're able to jump onto the object so that you can kind of move through the scene itself. In the next video, we'll do the animations.